Your words do matter. It's like a tube of toothpaste. Once it leaves that tube, you can't put the toothpaste back in. So whether that feedback is negative or positive, making sure you're intentional with the communication, that's where radical candor could come in from another mechanism of feedback. It's super important to remember that your words have impacts. And there's studies of this where it's a Japanese scientist where he'll say that your words actually can alter reality in the physical space that exists. It's a super interesting study, but that's why that intention is so key for success there.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Today is not about us, it's about you. So this is going to be jam-packed. Yeah, tons of dad jokes coming.
We are right now laying the groundwork for who is going to be leading tomorrow.
This song is such a jam.
Ideas don't build multi-million-dollar businesses. It's the implementation and execution of those ideas that do.
Self-made can lead to self-destruction. You are successful at what you give attention to.
This is why I was created. This is why I was made. I was made to do this.
It's about how to build your playbook.
That was such an incredible session.
Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, the real-time podcast serving you with practical, actionable frameworks and guidance to help you operationalize, nurture, and maximize both the growth of your business, but also we think we are helping you grow as people, as humans. So I am one of your hosts, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer, joined by my co-host, Shawn, the super awesome training guy. And we are so excited for what we have in store for you today.
Good to be with you today. Again, Shawn Jensen. I'm a senior success coach here at Trainual. I'm going to be successful in saying my title. But I've been here for a little bit and focus on instructional design. And I just really love doing this. So we're going to have a great time today. And really want to touch on really quickly about the format of this. We have a really great format in that this is like, think about like a podcast. You listen to it, you're just kind of listening to it. But here you get to participate in the podcast. It's a nice little show. So feel free to use the chat, ask questions. You know, you be part of this discussion here today. We're excited to have Kelly with us. We'll be introducing her in just a few moments, but feel free to chat in. And if you had a question, you want to say something nice and live, then you can raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute that line for you and you can chat with us directly. Okay, so there we go. That's what we're going to do for today. Let's have a great time. Back over to you, Mallory.
We've had a lot to be thankful for this month, and it got us thinking about how grateful we are for our teams, not just this time of year, but all year long. And we thought, what better topic is there right now than how to build a culture of gratitude? And so joining us today is none other than Kelly Loudermilk. Kelly is a respected speaker, people ops fanatic, and proud HR nerd. She's a small business owner and a mom of two, bringing over a decade of HR experience to us today. She's worked with teams from as little as 3 employees all the way up to massive teams nearing 15,000 employees. She helps CEOs, leaders, managers, and fellow peers transform how they collaborate and appreciate one another in the workplace. So welcome, Kelly. We're super excited to have you here.
Awesome. Excited to be here. I have this title here called Talent Innovator, and I love it in terms of Inside the Process because what it does and what it means to me and what you all will be doing as you grow in your own careers is innovating your own respective places and different ways. So it's taking different frameworks and applying it to what you do and how you do it. And that's the innovation at work. So I love that in terms of just your own growth, as well as applying these different frameworks to both your employees and your customers. So today we are going to be talking about gratitude. And what we're going to really start off with is the intention and meaning behind it and why that's such a key piece. And we'll actually look for inspiration here from Tony Robbins, one of the best speakers out there in the globe. Then we're going to actually talk about how you can meet your employees and teammates where they're at, but this also can apply to your customers and something that we want to talk through as well. And how you need to build that structure and that purpose in the culture that you have, whether that is your employee or your customer base that you're targeting. And then one of the fun things that I love is applying different frameworks, as I mentioned, and utilizing the 5 love languages or the 5 appreciation languages at work is something that we're going to actually play around with here and talk through as an inspiration point for you. And there's also, 2 awesome new templates that have been released from Trainual regarding both the employee side and the customer side of appreciation and gratitude. So please feel free to look through those. I think I actually saw it from y'all in the newsletter recently, the manual newsletter. So definitely something very cool.
Yeah, we were super excited to roll those out. We can't thank you enough for providing your HR expertise, your people ops expertise, just with customers and employees to help us build those out. So that was a really awesome partnership. Real quickly before we get started, there's this popular saying that gets thrown around a lot, and it's thanks for all you do, right? Like, I feel like so many of us have heard that. And you do something awesome, you make an impact, and someone goes, thanks for all your hard work. Thanks for all you do, right? And I feel like sometimes that can feel as meaningless as the dreaded I'm sorry apology, right? Where's the intent? Where's the supporting evidence? Where is the just appreciation for what it actually took me as the contributor to accomplish this objective? And how do I know that you really value what I've done to make this happen? So I'm hoping with that frame of mind, you can walk us through how we can really put the authenticity behind the gratitude that we show to others in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Let me jump in real quick because I've got a great illustration about what you just said, right?
Yes.
Have we always felt this way here?
I love this guy. He's so funny.
Yeah. For real, all right? So, yeah, I mean, again, when we chatted about this a little bit before that, we need to, and this is one of the things you'll be talking a little further about, Kelly, but meeting people where they're at, we want to show our appreciation. And how are we doing it? Are we doing it intentionally? Are we doing it disingenuously? Just because we should do it. So I'm particularly excited to hear a little bit more from you about that one as well.
Yeah. And it actually comes into this structure that I love. There is what we call this effort paradox. It is something that a lot of people may talk through as you go into processes or developing processes. And the effort paradox essentially is you have to put a lot of effort into something to make it seem and look effortless. Similarly, you'll see that mindset where you're paying $150 an hour for a plumber and they have decades of experience. Well, you're paying for that experience, right? And so they make it look effortlessly by twisting a knob. And you're like, why am I paying that? Well, it's because of the effort paradox. You put so much into this to make it look effortless. And that's what we have here for our attitude of gratitude. And I want you to think about this as your own personal mind shift. Like your mind is shifting and your behavior is shifting towards this attitude of gratitude. And it's really catchy and something that if you have kids, you may have seen on some different types of YouTube channels, especially just given the time of year. And here in this middle here, we have recognition and gratitude. This is our structure that we're going to utilize here. And the reason why I love this pyramid idea is that it's the strongest structure in the geometric space, if you will, why we still have pyramids. And so we're going to have 3 key elements that exist to show recognition and gratitude. And I want you to remember that this framework, we're utilizing our innovation mindset, can be applied to your employees and your customer base. It's the same mechanism that can vary your audience and your target, and how that variation may shift can have slight changes, but the idea is the same. So although I am someone who primarily works with the employee side, don't forget that this same mechanism can be applied to the customer base that you have and can make it really fun and exciting from there as well. So the first and most important thing when it comes to creating your attitude of gratitude is the intention in the meeting. And I love this idea because this is where it all starts. And Tony Robbins, I actually came across one of his famous speeches where he talks about your quality of life. And that, he gives the example, you could have a lot of money and still be upset or not happy. You could have the best relationships and still be lonely and unhappy. And he says there's two things that control your quality of life. It is the meaning and emotion, and that it's the meaning you put into things that drives your emotion. And based on that emotion, you make decisions. And so applying that same mechanism to your strategy of gratitude is the key element that changes just the thank you for all you can do to something that really impacts you. So it's the intention and the meaning that we put into our entire strategy and structure. If we actually have a really strong meaning and why behind our gratitude, then you're going to evoke an emotion. And that emotion creates decisions or actions or impact. And so the key success factor for anything that you do really comes down to the emotion that you create from the meaning. And that's your purpose. And it's not something to just say, we want to just showcase you our gratitude because we want a pizza party. It's like, you do so much. You do so much that we don't want you to worry about lunch today. We're going to take care of it, and we're going to address your needs, and we're going to make it fun. That's a different kind of meaning to evoke a different kind of emotion on a very similar type of mechanism that we see in the workplace is the pizza party. And you can shift that based on how you approach your intention and your meaning. The next thing that really helps to drive that mission of intention and meaning is going to be the structure and the culture behind it. You can't do anything without some sort of structure and culture piece to it. This is where that effort paradox comes into play. You put so much effort in to make it look effortless. So there's a lot to that. And just like with Trainual, I love Trainual's setup because the inner structure and the interface is so easy to use. And I use the crap out of the GIFs when it comes to just creating a policy. But there's so much effort that goes into making that look effortless as a user. So similarly, as an employee or a customer, I shouldn't know all the stuff that you have going on when you do showcase your appreciation for me, or like, hey, you're a customer. I love having you here. Here's a mug or something, right? So it really just means that you have to have the proper structure and the culture that supports that. And I think Mallory and Shawn, you mentioned one time before in a previous conversation about how Trainual does this with their culture and that they have a meaning behind the structure that they've created. Do you have that example that you remember?
So one of the things that I'd bring up is, and so I've been with Trainual for almost 5 years. And one of the things that happened from day one of my time there is we had a praise channel inside of our Slack. So we use Slack as our messaging. And we had a praise channel. I'd never seen that before. Praise for me was like every once in a while you'd hear like, hey, good job. And that was kind of it before in my previous employment. This was like an actual intentional place where anyone in the company, which we were, 9 strong at the time, we could go in and just say, hey, you know what? I noticed this. Someone did this week. This was really cool. Someone helped me with that. And this was so intentional. I'd never experienced before. It's like, well, how are we going to have that many nice things to say all the time, right? We're a business. We've got things we got to do. But it's become this thing. And now we use another tool called Lattice to kind of put some framework around the praise and tie them back to our core values. But we have this ongoing praise channel here at Trainual, and that is regularly used. It's part of the culture, right? It's a framework that is there. Everyone knows it. And it's just a natural thing we do. I think maybe it's a little new for people as they come in, but we have a culture of praise that we've instilled. And that's something that's been very powerful for me here that I've not experienced anywhere else before. And it's not just, oh, I hope I get praised today. It's become this thing as, who can I praise this week? And whom I'm thinking more intentionally about, what did people do this week to help me? Or what did I observe them doing to help customers or helping other people within the team? And then taking the actual time to call those things out publicly, and what that does for camaraderie, what that does for team dynamics. And it's a really powerful thing. So that's one framework that I'd share that we do that works very effectively.
Yeah, the compound effect is twofold. One, it sets the example like you're talking about. So more people are seeing how to give praise, kind of like how you need an example of how to give feedback. Some people need an example of how to effectively give praise and show gratitude, which is why we're here today. So it sets the example. And then the secondary compound effect here is that so many people are jumping in on that and saying, oh yeah, I love working with her too, or I've had the same experience on this project, or she really helped me one time with, this experience. And there's just like this compounding effect of other people jumping in and saying, yeah, I agree. Like this person's awesome. Or it's just like the Slack emojis, and there's, half the company or more jumping in and with the hearts and like the celebration. And that feels so powerful than just hearing it from one person.
I totally love that idea. It's something that you see more and more being implemented across different organizations, and kind of like Kayla even mentioned in the chat, having a similar mechanism in a different type of workplace that may not necessarily have a Slack dedicated to it, but a similar mechanism that can really showcase that. And this kind of brings me to my next point, because Shawn, you mentioned publicly acknowledging these folks. I don't necessarily like public acknowledgement. And so the third piece of success when it comes to gratitude is meeting people where they're at. And I like, if you did that on Slack, Shawn, it's like, great, but I would be like, I'm not comfortable with that. I hate that because I'm just not one of those types of people. And so I would prefer those types of recognition in a private setting or in a DM, right? And so there's one of those things where meeting people where they're at is giving that meaning and that emotion to the nth degree, where you're able to actually derive that emotion more so, creating the structure to do so, to meet people where they're at, gives you the flexibility to go in a lot of different directions based on what they may want. And it allows you to kind of get this more customized idea. So kind of like what Mallory mentioned, thanks for all your hard work. It's like, for some people, that's enough. But for others, it's not. And meeting people where they're at based on the structure given to you by your organization and the cultures you've put in place for showing recognition and gratitude, and the meaning that you put into it, and that intention and the effort that you put into it, really makes it where when you're meeting somebody where they're at, it has that ability to actually drive the emotion and actually drive the impact. And a good example is something that I actually received. And it's from a direct report that I had at a startup a couple years ago. And she actually sent me a gift basket when my position was downsized. And it was out of the blue, had no idea, came a couple of months later. But her card was so meaningful because words of affirmation is my love language and my appreciation language. And it was done privately. And I actually still have that card on my board here just for myself, but that's meeting people where they're at. She had no clue kind of what I needed or how I operate, but that particular piece had so much intention and meaning that it drove so much emotion that I actually kept that to where I look at it a lot when I'm feeling down. And so it's one of those things where when you meet people where they're at, you are amplifying the rest of this particular pyramid and structure and deriving that meaning and emotion, that you are creating a true essence of an attitude of gratitude that extends beyond your workplace and extends beyond how you interact with your customers. And that's something that you just don't get to do on a regular basis that can really make a difference to people in their lives, more so than you ever recognize on your own individual level. And that's super exciting to be a part of. And so kind of meeting people where they're at and utilizing that particular example, we're going to go into this framework of the 5 appreciation languages. And this is just something that a lot of us know as the 5 love languages. And the author, Gary, actually created something for the workplace because the 5 love languages may not translate over to the workplace as well, especially since somebody who works a lot with employment law, there can always be some fun little caveats to that. So the 5 appreciation languages are great for the workplace. And kind of piggybacking off of what I utilize, words of affirmation is one of the most common ways to show gratitude. But again, it matters the meaning and the intention behind it and the culture around it and the structure. So similarly to this praise channel, if it's not utilized in the right way in meeting people where they're at and creating a culture or an ecosystem that thrives on that appreciation and a structure that and promotes it, and there's no meaning behind it, it's not going to do anything correctly. So those words of affirmations will fall flat. So there's got to be that effort put into it where you're at. And so, these are like written acknowledgements, verbal acknowledgements, not just saying great work, Mallory. It's like, Mallory, you nailed it on that presentation and you put so much time and effort into that and it showed, and I got compliments from the team and I love what you did there. Being specific in that way. Let me pause
on that one really quickly. That's something that resonates so much with me because I have kids, and you ask them things like, "Hey, how was your day?" and they go, "It's fine, it's good," which gives me like no information at all about what their day was actually like. And so the specificity and getting to that specificity is something that is incredibly valuable. Something I actually learned this a couple weeks ago, and I relearned because I've done this before, but I heard a great TED Talk that I'll share a little bit later on, but where he talked about taking the time to be very intentional about gratitude. And one of the things he suggested is every morning, before you start your day, your work day, right? Just sit down and be very specific and write down like 3 to 5 things that you're specifically grateful for. And I'd say that specifically before work, do this for work, right? Look at the things at work that you are grateful for, but then again, add the specificity, right? Versus just, well, I'm grateful for work today, and just grateful for the top level things. If you get in there and get deeper, you do this on a regular basis. I did this today. There's my list right there on a sticky note. It's kind of right there, but getting in and being super specific, which comes back to what we were just talking about here about being very specific in the type of feedback we're giving, and what we are grateful for, really adds to your ability to see those things more clearly. If you do this more consistently, they are more surface at the beginning. But as you continue on, they get deeper and deeper and deeper because you're getting more meaning out of it. So it comes right back to what we were just talking about here, being very specific in those words of affirmation. We want to know exactly what it was that you were grateful for. And this is something we've seen that work really well with that praise channel we talked about.
Yeah, that's one of those reasons why that structure and that culture matter, and that intention and meaning. And that way you can meet them where they're at. I love Nicole's example where their company looks like they have a really great structure to meet people where they're at. She got to go hug a redwood tree. I mean, not like those things are so cool to me. It's like a whole nother world. So I love that example, Nicole. And that's a really good example of where they're able to create such an amazing ecosystem that this attitude of gratitude can actually meet people where they're at and where they want to be. And, words of affirmation, your words do matter. It's like a tube of toothpaste. Once it leaves that tube, you can't put the toothpaste back in. So whether that feedback is negative or positive, making sure you're intentional with the communication, that's where radical candor could come in from another mechanism of, feedback. It's super important to remember that your words have impacts. And there's studies of this where it's a Japanese scientist where he'll say that your words actually can alter reality in the physical space that exists. It's a super interesting study, but that's why that intention is so key for success there. Another one that I see quite a bit come around the holidays, especially for those who suffer from seasonal depression, is quality time. And quality time is something that people love to spend with others. So they really get a lot of gratitude or feeling of gratitude through those happy hours, those lunch and learns, those ability for you to have a full presence with them, not you just meeting with them one-on-one, doing your like, hey, Mallory, how you doing this week? Okay, what's your priorities? I got an email. Like that happens so much and it's no offense, y'all, but we can see it. Like if I'm on the other line with you and you got an email coming in or you're clicking on another tab, I can tell. And so truly being physically present 100%, I always like to say it's a threefold presence. You're physically present, you're mentally present, and you're emotionally present. And if you're not all three present in that time, that person that really needs quality time, whether that's with the group or with you individually to showcase your appreciation, it's not going to mean anything. And that's where that structure, that culture, and that intention and meaning come into play. And so quality time can be a lot of fun if you're fully there.
I'd love to share an example on this one, Kelly.
Go for it.
Okay. So a lot of you know, because I've shared this a couple of times on this session, but I've also shared it in our Trainual Insiders group, that I'm newer to Trainual. My 1 year is actually coming up, but it doesn't feel like I've been here almost a year. But I was reminiscing one day, or really not reminiscing, but reflecting on how just appreciative I've been that in the time that I've been here, my manager has never missed a one-to-one unless something like monumental is going on, like travel, or it's just like, hey, like we have heads down time because it's quiet week or what have you. But there's been very, very, very few occasions where she's ever canceled a one-to-one on me, which is not something I'd ever experienced in any of my prior roles. The managers that I've had in the past would say, "You got this. I trust you. You're doing a great job." You know, those like blank statement, "You're doing awesome. Like, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. Like, I don't think we need to meet." And while they had good intentions of, "I trust you. You've got this. You're good to go." Like, that time was so important for me to not only hear those words of affirmation and to be able to talk about what I was doing and maybe just like vent a little sometimes if I needed to. But I was reflecting on that, and I had shared a post about it on LinkedIn, just really like appreciating one-to-ones and encouraging other leaders to hold that one-to-one sacred. And for whatever reason, it started pretty much a LinkedIn movement. It had almost 100,000 engagements. It made its way around to 7 million people, and over 11,000 people shared it. That's a lot of shares. And it definitely became, like I said, like a movement. And I think it's just a really important aspect to touch on today, because we can all get to this place of, hey, I think we're okay. We can cancel that one-to-one. But some people, 7 million people would agree that one-to-one time is super important. So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and take you out to lunch. We've got to go off site and we got to like do this whole extra thing. Like, just showing up when you plan to show up or when you intended to show up can sometimes make all the difference too.
I love that. It's definitely really fun to see when people take that so seriously. And even if it's like a 5-minute check-in, that time is still sacred because it's the quality time. And it's just, kind of going back to your kids, Shawn, like, if you don't show up to pick up your kids, what are they going to do? Right. I mean, that's how I got my first cell phone decades and decades ago. My dad forgot me at school for, 2+ hours. Right. So that piece of just showing up is so important. And it's so funny because I still hold it over his head, but it's okay.
I was going to ask.
It's a really fun thing. I mean, I gotta lots of those things. I was like, I'll forgive you if you get me Taco Bueno. And that was like an Oklahoma thing. I'm in Denver now, but I just wanted that. And so I was super happy about it. And I was like, I don't really care because I got, it is what it is, right? But that quality time, I love that it was shared so much because it's such a simple thing that is missed so much as well. And this is a really good reminder of our structure that we have for everyone here, that this can be a simple solution. It can be a simple process, that effort paradox. Like, there could be so much into it and it look effortless, and showing up is what makes it look effortless. And that's what matters. And I love that. So thank you for sharing. I love that.
Yeah. It's not the quantity of your time, but the quality of your time. So 5 minutes is better than an hour if the quality is there. So I love that you're giving practical and simple ways to make sure that you're spending that quality time together.
Absolutely.
One thing that was popping real quick. So Adam is my manager here, and our sessions range between, our one-to-one sessions we have on a weekly basis. They range anywhere between 15 minutes to 30 minutes. But his very first question is, hey, how's it going? And that's not just like I've got to say this and just get that over with really quickly, Like, we'll have a little chat about that, like, how's it going? Hell, what are you working on? What's going on right now? What's going on in life? How's your family? So we do that. We have that little dialogue, and it's so genuine. Mm-hmm. And that time is well spent. It guides and directs and motivates what happens next. And that's a powerful thing for me. So I agree with you, Mallory. That's a thing I've never experienced that before, but it's something I will absolutely be doing myself at some point if I'm leading people. So there you go.
I love that because that also goes into that structure and culture that was created of meeting people where they're at, but there's intention and meaning behind it. So again, I love the pyramid idea. It's just so like, I love that. So you guys are you're doing my job for me. It's so easy. I love this. So the next one we have here is actually one that we see a lot of leaders kind of lean into. And Dan actually also mentioned that this is kind of his love language from him to others. And that's acts of service. And this is something that, quite honestly, I think anybody who's a people leader should be doing as like their standard acts of practice, because that's your job, is to serve others. So that's my personal bias. But these are things for actually doing what you say you're going to do. So if you're going to set a calendar invite for your weekly, meeting, showing up. Again, super simple, but showing up could be an act of service and holding that sacred. It's also just giving through, opportunities of growth, saying, I really love what you did here, Mallory. I think there's a lot of potential. What are you looking to do? And actually providing those opportunities. And so it's really following through on those commitments that matter. And it's also just showing that actions speak louder than words. So if you're going to have words of affirmation, acknowledging somebody, and you're promising something, if you don't do that, that is going to cause a catastrophic impact to your neurological makeup. And I will nerd out around neuroscience all day long when it comes to your people engagement strategies. So if you ever want to have those conversations, happy to do so. But this has an actual physiological impact if you don't follow through on these things. So acts of service can be super important. And they're kind of that basic mindset of actually putting things into action and doing what you're saying you're going to do. And something that you should see, especially on the customer side of things, but on the employee side as well, when you are a people leader specifically. This one is my favorite, just in sense of, as somebody who is a person in the people ops space, is swag. So gifts. This is a really simple win. But again, it really matters around the intention, the meaning, and the structure and the culture behind it. Because if you're just giving out swag for the purpose of giving out swag, it means nothing. I have a lot of really useless notebooks and mugs that I will get rid of as soon as I get them, because I have a gajillion of them. But I've received swag that is literally a pair of flip-flops that I'll actually use. I've also received like little stress balls that look like little animals, and I love those types of things. And so they're more unique to like what I want. I actually still have a pair of socks from like a SHRM conference back before COVID, right? And so it's just like making those more fun and meaningful, and meeting people where they're at can be really great. So personalizing your rewards, such as, going to meet a redwood with Nicole, that's still a gift. That's a physical creation of recognition. And that's what this is gifts. So it's not just swag. I just have a lot of fun creating swag. But it can be a personalized gift or reward that means something. And there's literally a company called Blueboard that does that as an example. They do experiences. That's still a gift and meeting someone where they're at. So looks like you're still waiting on some custom Trannual swag there, Mallory.
I wish. It would probably be crazy expensive, but just putting it out into the universe, that I would totally rock one at a jiu-jitsu competition.
There you go. I love it.
I love that you mentioned the website. Can you mention that again?
So I believe it's called Blueboard. I could be misremembering it, but it's one of those things that they do experiences. There's a lot more of these types of companies popping up, and you can do this without a third party. And so it's just something that you can really have. My favorite one is actually giving an extra day of PTO if you're utilizing like a point system, especially in more manual labor type of environments, that goes the extra mile. So it just kind of depends again on your audience and where you're meeting people. Oh, thank you, Mallory, for sending that. So I love this question, Dan. I'm going to read it real quick. As a leader or manager, should each direct report specific appreciation language be formally tracked in some way? So I love that question because it's really specific in the sense that you could go either way. You could say there's a way to say no and just say like, you can kind of gauge. That's kind of what those books kind of teach you to do, is gauge people's languages and kind of meet them where they're at. But you also could, if you really wanted to, that goes into your culture and your structure. And is there meaning behind it? If there's not a meaning behind that particular part of your structure, that we actually ask these questions, we actually track this to meet where you're at, that makes sense to me, to where you're like, okay, let's actually implement that as part of our strategy. If it's not for that purpose, it may not be something you want to track, and it's something that you train your people leaders to understand and read and acknowledge. And so there's various ways that you can kind of take that question and answer depending on your culture and what looks like for your gratitude, your attitude of gratitude. So I would say that you could, if you wanted to, you could even at the individual level if you wanted to, or you could create that in your strategy as to the intention and the why, how you track it and structure, and how it's implemented in your culture, and how you're able to meet people where they're at. So you could actually create that as part of your strategy if you really wanted to. So great question.
Yeah, some of the tests that we have taken, like the Colby, I think it's Colby, right? The Colby assessments that we've taken, 16 personalities at my prior company, like we put those in our Trainual profile, so like our About Me section. So if somebody's engaging with me for the first time, new to the team, they can go in there and kind of see that information. So I would highly encourage you to put it there if you're a Trainual user.
I also love like the predictive index. That's what I've utilized. There's so many emergenetics, love emergenetics too, especially when you pair it with predictive index. That's great. And so you have a lot of mechanisms, as well as there's some great Trainual templates, y'all, of just kind of an about me thing. Even if you don't have an assessment, that they can put those questions in your template or what you utilize and just say, how do you like to show appreciation, or how do you like to be appreciated? So there are templates already available that you can leverage without the need of an assessment, which is also phenomenal.
Now, one of the simplest, one thing I was thinking about, one of the simplest forms of assessment that we could utilize even in our one-on-ones, right? Mm-hmm. Is just asking, I love that question. It's like, hey, how do you like to be rewarded? I want to reward you when you're doing great stuff. How do you like to be rewarded? What are some things that you like? What do you enjoy? Again, part of that one-on-one dialogue, just getting to know the individuals better. Again, Nicole's mentioned a couple of things here about how they really get to know their people really well. I don't know of a better way to do that than in those one-on-ones and having those real conversations. So just ask them.
That's a really good thing, but that goes back to your acts of service. Don't ask if you have no intention of following through with it, or following the tracking or taking a note. I don't care if you have 20 sticky notes on your monitor. If you are going to ask that, you better do something with it. Otherwise, you are only leading that person on to a situation that will be negatively impacting your retention. And it's the same with a customer. If you ask yourself, if you put that mindset in the customer's mindset, right? I would never ask my customer something and just say, okay, cool, and then move on, right? Like, you're not going to do that with a customer. So that same mindset that we really try to apply to our customer base and servicing them, you have to do that same mindset internally, because your customers are your employees. You just don't realize that often when it comes to the type of culture that people have created. And so that's a framework that a lot of people, professionals like myself, are trying to shift in terms of that internal structure. And you probably see it on LinkedIn as well. But it's one of those things to keep in mind. They are your customers just as much as your actual customers. They just do things a little bit differently. That's all. And so just something to keep in mind. If you're going to do that in your one-on-ones, love it. Super simple way to find out. Better be able to act upon it. Dan also put in here, Blue Mountain is one. Postal is another one that does it. Postable, there's 2 different websites there. So that's super great. I love that with the scrub stipend, especially when you can, Kayla, have some fun with your scrubs. I do that with my glasses. I have holiday glasses. So I know some my friends who are nurses, they go all out with their holiday scrubs. And I think that's phenomenal. So another great way. And I'll also take an Amazon gift card, because who doesn't go to Amazon at this point? So all great examples. The last one is a little funky that we all kind of think about in the workplace. We're like, physical touch. Okay. So this is a really common one that we see a lot on the love languages side, but it does actually come into the workplace, and you have to obviously be careful with this. So physical touch in the workplace in terms of an appreciation can really be just a high five or a fist bump or a pat on the back. And so although they seem super simple, if that is really their love language, or their appreciation language, something that's fundamental to them where they connect emotion and meaning behind like an actual physical touch, like a fist bump, then this can go a long way. But keep in mind that you're in the workplace and that this should not be the primary purpose of meeting someone where they're at. You can always just fist pump like Shawn on your way to his office or something in a physical workplace, but also piggyback it with a card or words of affirmation or an act of service along the way. So this is something that usually is utilized in tandem. This is also something that I've seen from a customer base. One of my alma maters for my bachelor's, they actually have a dog, a service dog, who is their mascot, right? And she does a lot of work in the community as a service dog, but she's also this brand ambassador. That's a really great example of physical touch in the workplace because I love her. I don't actually go back to that, my alma mater, since I've moved away, but that's a really great way to connect with somebody or connect with that in a physical way that doesn't break any rules or laws or regulations. So you could have a little bit of fun with this if you so choose. And research does show that a high five or a fist bump can actually increase recognition, productivity, and achievement. And it's a study that they actually utilized in children. And so it's something that you can also keep in mind that it can be simple and tasteful and still go a long way when you piggyback it with one of the other four appreciation languages here. So love that. Let's see here. Any questions about these? Because I know some of these they seem so simple and when you say it, right, and you're kind of like, okay, I get it. But it's, again, the meaning that you put behind it, the intention that you put into it, and the effort that you put into it, and that structure that you have created so that all this can actually exist in your attitude of gratitude, so to speak. And again, it's that effort paradox. There is a lot of stuff that goes into what you create in your strategy and how you're able to execute it down to the nth degree. But it's something that is behind the curtains. And so there's a lot of complexity that can add up to this, even though it sounds so simple. But these are simple examples to utilize and take forward. So any questions that are coming from y'all that you're just kind of like, well, what about this? Or another example that you may have when it comes to what you've seen. So we've had some great examples from Kayla and from Nicole. Anything else that you all can think of? Fist bump an old guy. You can always do like what they have. I've seen people like should go into a fist bump. They're like, what do I do with this? So those are fun. High fives can still go a long way. That's a universal language. Everybody loves high fives. So that's always fun as well. Awesome. So I'm going to take silence as golden. That's what I always say to my kids. I'm like, well, sometimes it's golden, sometimes it's not. But in this case, I'm going to take it as golden. So Shawn, you mentioned earlier that you actually had a TED Talk that you kind of took away some notes from. I would love to hear a little bit more about that because I think it actually goes really well with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm going to share a little quote that I kind of riffed off of. This is Brother David Steindl Rast, and I probably butchered his name, but he's fantastic TED Talk. We'll share a link to this where he talks about gratitude specifically and how we tend to think generally that we are grateful because we're happy. I'm feeling pretty happy. I got a lot of stuff to be grateful for. A lot of people I get to work with, I'm really grateful for them. And I'm happy. Okay. And that we are more grateful when we are happy. But I think a lot of us maybe know individuals on both sides of wealth and poverty, with lots of things, very little things, that it has nothing to do with the things, right? It is the mindset, Kelly, that you've been talking about. So he talks about how, no, we are not grateful because we're happy. We are happy because we're grateful. And that really resonated a lot with me. So as I thought about this, I kind of thought, if you want your employees to be happy at work, he gave this method of stopping, slowing down, and make the intentional time to show that to show your gratitude for them in meaningful ways. And it does take time. And that's one of these things that when we talk about these little strategies, we are busy in our businesses. Okay. But these are some of these little strategies that do take time, but the ROI on the back end of those is so phenomenal. I mean, again, Nicole, Kayla, and several of you have mentioned the things you're doing. I know you're seeing the value of this. So it's something to be thinking about, taking the time to stop and being very intentional about how you're showing that gratitude in those meaningful ways. Getting to know the people, getting to know your individuals. And again, we've talked a lot about our employees today, but Kelly, you mentioned this at the very beginning. Everything we've talked about today translates perfectly well for our customers. How are we getting to know our customers? What are our customer service people doing to build relationships of trust with the people that they're working with? How are we extending ourselves out to help our customers to know that, hey, we care about you and your business and not just your money that you're giving us to help you with that, right? So it's a thought that I'm carrying in my mind as we get into the rest of this part of this year, but wanted to share that with y'all as well.
Dan dropped a really good question in the chat that I want to share here. So he said, are there warning signs to look for that indicates that you are not showing appreciation enough or in the correct manner? I think that's a really solid question.
So it's a really great question. And I have to coach a lot of executives through this, especially when they're dealing with a really big turnover happening, or they are dealing with times of economic turmoil and having to do reductions in forces. So there are warning signs, but most of those warning signs you'll never see, primarily because they're never going to showcase them in the workplace. And that's what's so difficult when it comes to the employee side. Nicole has a really good note here as well. eNPS scores are super great and super helpful. But unless you have that structure or your culture really showcasing how anonymous and how that feedback is utilized, you're never going to get the feedback that's going to give you those warning signs. There are some cultures that are super great at practicing radical candor. And so they have the culture and the structure showcasing that you can provide this feedback and you can help create the culture that we want to create that leads to these types of things. And so they have that built in where they do actually receive a little bit more of that feedback transparently of like, hey, this kind of sucks, right? And so they're able to take action on it. However, if you don't have that built into your overall people strategy, you're not going to see that feedback in your eNPS score. You might just see it in the actual score. That's if they actually participate in it, because most of the time, half of your population won't. And so it's just one of those things that you have to put a lot of that, again, the effort paradox into building out that infrastructure from the people space to see whether or not people feel comfortable enough showcasing those signs. So kind of going back to that, you may see warning signs in terms of starting to miss more deadlines, starting to see more withdrawal, not showing up to different types of meetings, being more late. That's when you have those one-on-ones, correct? And you're saying, hey, kind of like what Shawn said with his manager, Adam, what's going on? Like, how are you doing? Like really creating that moment to connect. And you can truly set up that expectation. Hey, Dan, I've been noticing some things. Do you mind if we have an open conversation? And the reason why you're asking that's a coaching technique. It opens up their mental capacity. It's a neurological and neurolinguistics programming type of technique that allows them to be more open and receptive to the conversation. Because otherwise they're going to shut you out and they're not going to respond. They're just going to give you what you want to hear and you're never going to get anywhere. So you need to have that moment of saying, hey, Dan, like I've been noticing some key behaviors that have me concerned. I really want to have that conversation with you. And I want to make sure that I'm providing you the space to be open about it. Do you have that space right now? Can we talk through that? And then you talk through those specific examples. Dan, I've noticed that you've been, missing some deadlines. Is something going on that you want to work through with me? Like, what can we do to help facilitate your success? So really taking those coaching techniques that you see in so many different areas. This goes back to that talent innovation that I mentioned. It's that innovation mindset, taking these techniques from different areas of your life and applying it to your people strategy. And that's how you start to open up the conversation. But those warning signs are going to be what you see in most types of posts that you see on social media. It's a lack of attention to detail. It's a lack of productivity. It's a lack of performance starting to showcase. Them not being as active on different types of communication channels. They are starting to withdraw. That's your number one warning sign when it comes to these things. That's not indicative of you not doing it right. There could be a lot of things that are impacting that, but that invites you to have the conversation to determine if that is one of the areas that you need to address, or if something else is happening in their life that you can accommodate for, and therefore going back to your gratitude and showing that you have done so much, you have been so important, you're experiencing this in your life, let's accommodate for it in your workplace to ensure that we still showcase our gratitude for what you do. So there's a lot of interconnectedness that you have. And so I like this idea, Dan, the word safe harbor, to be honest, to have that kind of, mechanism. And again, that goes back to that structure and culture that you built and the meaning behind it and meeting people where they're at so they can come to you. So that pyramid of strategy to create your gratitude or your strategy around rewards and recognition for whether it's your customer base or your employees can be applied in so many different ways that allows you to create that as a people strategy overall. So it's a really good thing to have. So I love that idea.
Yeah. And speaking of radical candor and building this culture of gratitude and feedback and praise, in my last organization, we had gotten some feedback on, the ENPS, that people didn't feel like they were appreciated and people didn't feel like they got praise and feedback timely enough. And so just had that, radical candor style conversation in a room full of leaders and said, hey, you go around the room. When's the last time you gave someone praise? When's the last time that you gave someone on your team feedback? And the silence was usually pretty telling that they weren't immediately with the response. So even if they had a response, if there was a really long pause there, then I know it probably wasn't that recent. And I mean, this should be something that you're doing weekly, with your team, like finding reasons to say like, hey, really love X project that you worked on, made a lot of great progress this week. I'm really excited to see this continue to flourish next week. Whatever the case may be, just being really specific. And that took 2 seconds. But a lot of the people that were sitting around the table were very slow to respond. And I think the same thing can be said of teams. So even if it's not a room full of leaders and it's just peer to peer, a bunch of us around the marketing table, we're all on the same team. And it's like, when's the last time anybody at this table reached out and gave gratitude to someone else? And it's, crickets and it's quiet. These are really good indicators just with that radical candor conversation that people probably aren't giving enough appreciation and feedback. And you probably don't have that culture really established.
And giving them the resources to do so. Like, it is really awkward to showcase not actually fawn over somebody, but like, Mallory, you're just so great. You're just killing it. Like, you just did it. Like, that can be really uncomfortable for people who have a neurological background or a child psychology background that have had different types of life events or their lenses. This is where your DEIB work comes into play, where they're not going to as naturally give that gratitude. And so that goes back into your structure and your cultural piece, just like Mallory said, giving those resources and the ability to create something that makes it easier and more comfortable, such as that praise channel or your wow cards that was mentioned by Kayla. Having that structure there, giving the guidance of how to do it and tying it to something meaningful can help give people that comfortability to step into the uncomfortable. And this all really lands with your people leaders. If you don't have the right support and mechanisms in place, like a how-to mechanism, like you can have in Trainual, down to like the practical how this looks and lives day to day, you're not giving the right resources to your people leaders to actually do what they're going to do and what you want them to do from your strategy. So your strategy, your people professionals like myself, our job at the end of the day, whether it's your customer base or your employee base, is to translate these strategies into reality. That's what we do. That's what we do as a profession. That may be varied based on the type of culture that you have or the organization that you have. That's my opinion of what people leaders do. And so what we do, including tools like Trainual, is create that strategy into the day-to-day reality with how-tos for your people leaders to give them the resources to be successful in executing these things, to create that culture, that structure, to implement the meaning, to have that meaning be so intentional that it evokes an emotion that creates that impact and that retention, whether that's your customer or your employee. So I love that idea of that. You've seen that, Mallory, and that it really makes so much sense, is to really making sure that those types of things and just having those conversations can open up so much more when it comes to all of these different types of strategies. So we kind of went off a little bit on the gratitude piece, but it really does play so much into the different areas of your organization outside of just your customers and your employees.
Absolutely. Well, this was incredible. I feel like I personally learned so much, and I'm just so glad that you agreed to come and speak with us and give us all these amazing lessons on just showing gratitude and appreciation for one another. And of course, our customers and maybe even other people in our lives, personal relationships that we have. And so definitely looking forward to taking some of these lessons to heart and putting them into practical application. Let us know in the chat what you guys thought about today. We can't thank you enough for continuing to show up and join us on Inside the Process. But we will send out the 2 templates that we worked on together, which is rewards and recognition for employees. That's the first process. And then the second process template that we'll send out is the customer appreciation process. So really excited. Those are very, very detailed. Our partner, Samo, worked with Kelly and I to put those together. And so we are very grateful for all of the work that they did there and happy to share it with you. But until next time, thank you, Kelly, for being here. Thank all of you for being here. And we will catch you later in December.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. You're awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. And everybody, thanks for being here, taking a whole hour of your time to hang out with us. I really appreciate you. So thanks and happy holidays.